Hot weather and breezy conditions are putting firefighters all around the county on high alert tonight. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Barbara Lee Edwards.
And I'm Steve Price. In tonight for Carlo, a heat advisory is in effect and already local firefighters are being put to the test. A brush fire broke out this afternoon along Interstate 8 near West Main Street, creating a smoky scene for drivers. And smoke can be seen right now near the border as a fire broke out east of the Otay port of entry. Neither has caused any damage.
And we're getting our first look at video from Tijuana, one of the multiple fires burning on the east side of the city. 350 people have been evacuated from an apartment building there. Chief Meteorologist Carlene Chavis is here now with a look at just how long this hot weather could stick around for. Carlene?
Well, going into our forecast, Barbara Lee, today was the hottest day for the coast and for a lot of areas for Southern California so far this year. So we are talking about a lot of heat, also other conditions that were relevant with those conditions out there for elevated fire risk, dry conditions as well as winds picking up. Let's go ahead and take a look at the model and why. It's because a surface high has moved over the Great Basin, and so that's what stored and really steered in that offshore flow. So we're talking very dry conditions. Relative humidity values have been around single digits, and we're seeing that right now. 7% for downtown, the same for El Cajon, 8% for Poway, and also in the desert. So we've had a lot of heat, and today we had some record temperatures. We were tying that record for downtown, also broke the record that we saw for El Cajon and tied the record for Escondido in those 90s. We're looking at more heat for tomorrow, just not as hot. All those details are ahead. Back to you, Barbara Lee and Steve.
A final tribute today for George Floyd, who was laid to rest in Houston next to his mother.
Family and friends gathered for his funeral service as protests for police reform continue in his memory. Danya Backus has more from Houston.
Steve and Barbara Lee, today we were reminded of who George Floyd was before his death became a national movement. He was remembered as a father, brother, and friend. George Floyd's final farewell was filled with music. Hallelujah! Come on, somebody praise him! And emotional reflection shared by those who knew him best.
I'm gonna miss my brother a whole lot, and I love him.
Family members and celebrities wore white for the private service in Houston where Floyd grew up.
There's gonna be justice for George Floyd.
The Reverend Al Sharpton delivered a rousing eulogy, bringing those in attendance to their feet.
If you had any idea that everybody from those in the Third Ward to those in Hollywood would show up in Houston and Minneapolis and in Fayetteville, North Carolina, you'd have took your knee off his neck.
The funeral service was by invitation only, but yesterday the church opened to the public and mourners poured in by the thousands. Floyd's death in Minneapolis, where a police officer knelt on his neck for nearly 9 minutes, has inspired a nationwide movement against racial injustice. But today in Houston, it was time for reflection.
A man by the name of Big Floyd walked amongst us down those CUNY home blocks, went on up to that crimson and red, and began to mentor and make a legacy that no one can deny.
In this city, we will ban chokeholds and strangleholds. In this city, we will require de-escalation.
Joe Biden joined the solemn service by video.
Now is the time, the purpose, the season to listen and heal. Now is the time for racial justice.
2 weeks after crying out for his mother, Floyd is being laid to rest beside her at the Pearland Cemetery in Texas. As you leave this church here in Houston, American flags line a stretch of the road. Volunteers who put them there says the flag represents that all people should be treated equally. Along with those flags this afternoon were hundreds of people who watched George Floyd's procession pass by. In Houston, Texas, Danya Backus, News 8.
The city of La Mesa is still in the recovery process tonight after violence erupted in the streets a little more than a week ago due to questions over the arrest of an unarmed black man by a white police officer. That, combined with national events, led to a protest and widespread destruction with looting and fires. Tonight, News 8's Monique Riego sat down with the chief of the La Mesa Police Department to talk about what happened.
You can see more than a week later, many businesses here are still boarded up after being destroyed by looters, including here in the village in La Mesa. Today, we were able to speak with the chief of police about how things escalated to that point and if anything could have been done to stop it.
Hey, bro, you can't do that.
It started with a controversial police encounter that quickly went viral and days later erupted into riots and violence on the streets of La Mesa.
We had the arson taking place. We had graffiti taking place already, so we had criminal acts.
Walt Vasquez is the chief of police for the La Mesa PD. This morning, he spoke with News 8 about the events that day after a timeline of the riots and law enforcement's response was released to the public.
Did you expect things to get as volatile as they did?
It's always hard to judge. You're working off of crowd dynamics, and you never know exactly what to expect.
It all started around 2 p.m. with a peaceful protest at police headquarters, with demonstrators marching, eventually, though, rushing the highway, breaking through a police line. As the crowd made its way back to PD headquarters, the violence intensified.
Bottles and rocks were thrown at the law enforcement officers, and then with the graffiti, we knew at that point that it had gone from a peaceful protest to an unlawful assembly.
The crowd was asked to disperse. When they didn't, tear gas was deployed, a tactic many people have criticized departments for using across the country.
With the tear gas, it doesn't involve any other uses of any other tactics or force. It's just trying to disperse the crowd because of the violence that was shown.
The once peaceful protests spiraling into a riot, and just after 9 p.m., reports of looting began coming in. 2 hours later, the fires and damage exploded. Some have questioned why it took officers so long to respond to the chaos, and whether more could have been done to prevent the violence from getting out of control.
That was a challenge at times, because every time our police vehicles would get close, they would get pelted by rocks and bottles and protesters. There were fires in a couple areas with vehicles.
And as you can see, the community beyond La Mesa really did come together to beautify what had been destroyed by painting these murals on all the boarded up windows. We're told that many of them will be saved to be used in a future project for the city. Monique Riego, News 8.
The man involved in the original police altercation was arrested, but those charges were all later dropped. The officer remains on administrative leave as a third party conducts a review of that incident.
A $10,000 reward is being offered for information leading to the arrest of a man who looted a La Mesa gun store. Take a good look at your screen. This is the man the ATF says stole from Alex Import's gun shop last Saturday night during the protest. 9 long guns were stolen. Anyone with information about this man or the burglary should call the ATF line directly. That number is on your screen. The San Diego City Council passed a controversial budget for the upcoming fiscal year that starts in July. Thousands of people wrote in or called to oppose increasing the budget for police. News 8's Brendan Lewis explains the council's decision and plans for a new Office of Race and Equity.
Stephen Barberly, today the City Council had to answer for how they voted when they passed the city's budget yesterday. They heard from thousands of people, many asking them to remove funding from the police department and put it toward other social programs. Today, they announced the creation of the new Office of Race and Equality with some fairly lofty goals.
So the motion as amended passes 8-1 with Council District 3 voting no.
The City Council voted 8-1 to pass San Diego's next annual budget. Many did so holding their nose, calling it imperfect, but the best under the circumstances.
The conversation does not end here. It starts here. I encourage everybody that has participated today to continue to engage.
Thousands of people wrote public comment. Nearly 500 called in. Some demanded the council defund the police, a now common call that frequently means moving money from policing and into social programs.
Over the long term, we have to look at reallocation and diverting funds to allow officers to do what they're originally charged to do.
But In many ways, the council's hands were tied. San Diego has a strong mayor system, which gives Mayor Kevin Faulconer line-item veto power. In essence, even if the council made changes, he could override it, and council members acknowledged this budget is what the mayor wanted, including the funding for the police. Only Chris Ward voted against it.
And if we're missing the moment to push immediate changes that simultaneously keep communities safe and restore community trust, then we're missing the moment.
The council strategically created the Office of Race and Equity by moving $3 million from general fund contracts into the new program. Councilmember Monica Montgomery says to start, it would work across city departments to change policies and partner with community nonprofits to ensure racial equality.
The saying that Black Lives Matter really appeals to our humanity, that we look at each other as human beings no matter what color we are, and until we can treat Black people the way that white people are treated, we still have work to do.
Some activists say they will hold the city council accountable when it comes to the November election, but many of them won't be returning. Some of them are either terming out and others seeking higher office. We'll talk a little bit more about what the November makeup looks like tonight at 6:30. Steve and Barbara Lee.
All right, Brandon, thank you. A dramatic moment caught on camera during a Black Lives Matter march in Oceanside on Sunday when a leader diffused a situation that could have turned chaotic.
Give me your knife. I'm the thumb man that's still small.
Some participants reported seeing a man in military-style clothing with a knife walking with a group. Now, we blurred his face because he is a teenager. A leader of the march approached the youth and tried to ease the tension just by talking to him.
And then as I start talking to him more, I could see him coming down, and he was trying to explain stuff. And then when I found out he was 16, I was like, oh, it's just a kid. He don't know any better. So whoever was teaching him or didn't teach him failed. So I wanted just to educate him on that part. And then after I found he was 16, I was like, man, just go ahead and give me the knife.
The team was walked away by a sergeant who held onto that knife overnight. Oceanside police say no one was charged. The death toll from the coronavirus in San Diego County now tops 300. The county has reported 110 newly confirmed cases of COVID-19 out of nearly 4,000 tests performed. That's a 2.8% rate. That's less than the 14-day rolling average of 3.1%. The total number of cases is up to 8,729. 5 new cases were reported, bringing that total to 301.